So this week in art, I'm going to start off with a little storytelling for you. And it has to do with how brushing your teeth led to an art movement. Hard to believe, I know, but we're all really familiar with tubes of toothpaste now. But before toothpaste was kept in tubes, it was kept in a heavy ceramic container with a lid. It would break easily, you couldn't transport it around very easily. And then they came up with this material called tin, a type of metal, and decided that they would use that for storing toothpaste. So some painters, a painter specifically named John Rand in the United States in 1841, said, hang on a minute, I could use that for storing paint. And the paint tube was born. So it's quite interesting how inventors usually create things because they have a need. So why did the painter John Rand need to put his paint in a tube? What did he put it in before that? Well, this is the gruesome part of the story. Painters would go to great lengths, mixing their paints from possibly ground up rocks, and bind it with oils and things, and then they would use it in their studio because you couldn't really take it anywhere with you unless you put it in something. So they would put it in something, and that something was an animal bladder. Do you know what a bladder is? It's that body part that stores urine. And so they would use that like a sack. So when the animals went off to slaughter, farm animals, they would use every single part of the animal. And the animal bladder would be used for storing things like paint. They used it in the art studio because when you opened it, there was no lid, you couldn't seal it back up. So when John Rand saw the toothpaste tube and thought, wait a minute, that paste, it's like paint. I could use that in my studio. The Impressionist art movement had begun. Well, not quite. So artists like Claude Monet and Auguste Renoir caught on to this and said, wait a minute, if my paint is in this tube, I can now go out of my studio and into the world to paint. So have a listen to this part of the story about out of the studio and how paint tubes started an art movement. Then come back to me for your instructions for art this week. Sometimes very small things have enormous consequences. One example is an invention by the American painter John Rand, which changed art more than he could possibly have imagined. Annoyed that his paint always dried out when he was painting outside, John Rand decided to fill the paint into little zinc tubes. In this way, he invented the paint tube in 1841. Now he could transport his paint easily, and he could close the tubes when he wasn't using them. Until then, paint had been transported in bags made of animal bladders, which could not be closed again once they had been opened. This meant that the paint dried out quickly and couldn't be used anymore. Not to mention maybe a few other things that you might question. The invention of the paint tube was particularly appealing to a group of young artists in France. Among them were painters who are now famous, like Claude Monet and Auguste Renoir and many others. They didn't want to be restricted to painting inside their studios anymore. They wanted to be outdoors to capture the light and colors of nature in their paintings. One morning in 1872, Claude Monet went off to the port of Le Havre and painted the sunrise there. He gave his picture the title Impression, Sunrise. Looking at the painting, you almost feel as though you were gazing at the scene yourself, but with blurred vision. When the painting and others by the young group of painters were first exhibited in Paris in 1874, they created a great commotion. The critics got really worked up about the paintings, which didn't seem to have the precise, realistic detail that was customary in art at the time. But Monet did not want to make paintings like that. He just wanted to capture the spontaneous impression of a sunrise. And he could do that best by painting it onto the canvas quickly, rather than trying to capture all the precise detail and working indoors in his studio. Because of the angry reaction that this particular painting received from a critic, the young painters decided to call themselves Impressionists at their next exhibition. The new name sounded good, and the artists also wanted to annoy that critic a little bit. Here's another painting that shows the impact of being able to take your paint in a tube easily anywhere you wish. Here's a picture of Claude Monet and his wife on the studio boat. So before paint tubes were invented, artists had to grind up the ingredients and mix it together with oils and other things that would stick the color together to create the paint. And it would dry out really easily and was really difficult to transport. So they would paint indoors in their studios. And you can imagine how all of a sudden being able to take your paint anywhere you wanted would change the way painters use their materials and the things and the ways that they painted. Imagine having a studio on a boat. Amazing. It was not just the way these artists painted that was new. What they painted was new as well. Until then, the subjects of paintings were usually from the Bible or from stories about mighty rulers. These stories didn't interest the Impressionists at all, however. They wanted to depict nature and the lives of ordinary people, how they danced, went for walks, or sat in cafes. The new subjects for painting bothered 19th century viewers even more than the casual way in which the Impressionists had painted them. It took a few years before people got used to Impressionism and before the art became popular. Until then, the Impressionists sold only a small number of paintings. Nowadays, however, the artworks of Claude Monet and his friends are among the most expensive in the world. The Impressionists evolutionized art, thanks in part to their colleague John Rand and his small but important invention of the paint tube. This is a painting by Auguste Renoir, painted in 1876, called The Dance à the Moulin de la Galette. Leisure was a completely new subject in painting. These sorts of scenes are typical of the Impressionists, who were not interested in stories about rulers and other things. The bright, cheerful atmosphere of the images, the soft light, were all the important features of Impressionist painting. So now that you've learned all about paint tubes and how they inspired painters like Claude Monet and Auguste Renoir to go out into the world and outside of their studios to paint, I want you to think about your presentation skills and make a choice. You can choose to use the rest of your time for art, just really learning how to do an outstanding title. As the year goes, you will do lots of different presentations, posters, all kinds of different things. So take some time and either use your observation skills and create a title in the style, either copy one of these styles or try to replicate them or come up with your own inventive way to write the word paint tubes. And then if you need to continue and improve your sketchnoting skills, you can replicate, again, improving your observation and presentation skills. Try and create a sketch note based on this, all about paint tubes. And there's a space up at the top here where you could add your own part to it from what you heard in the book, 13 Art Inventions, about paint tubes. Maybe you'll draw a picture of Claude Monet's super awesome paint studio on a boat that he had made, so that you remember all of these different things that this one invention led to. If, however, you're absolutely ace at titles in a creative and super neat way, and you are using sketch notes in your research, in your unit of inquiry and other lessons and things, then I challenge you instead to think like John Rand. He was a painter, but he was also an innovator, and he had a problem that he wanted to solve. You are an artist, and you have a problem right now that you need to solve. Many of you keep saying, I can't do the art. I don't have anything to use. I don't have a cereal box. I don't have paper. I don't have a pencil. So I challenge you to innovate at home and create an art movement. I think that focusing on creating art using sustainable ideas and materials is the art movement of the future. So get started today. I want to either see you ace your presentation skills and sketchnoting skills, or be an inventor and create an art movement from what you have available at home. What will you call your art movement? So take a picture of what it is that you create, title, sketch note, or perhaps a sculpture out of sustainable materials, and show me your creativity and presentation skills improving.